This is ION Hong Kong with Key.
And this is Harminder, and we'll be discussing the top news for the week involving Hong Kong and China. And welcome back to the second half of ION Hong Kong. We have in studio with us Jonathon Morris. Jonathon Morris is doing his own podcast and as well as working on a documentary. You can follow him at jonathanjk.com and also on Twitter, JonathanJK. So, Jonathon, thank you for joining us.
You've said Jonathan so many times.
I know. I'll just call you John. It'll make it easier. So, John, why don't you tell us about your podcast first, and then we'll go on from there.
Okay. My podcast is actually is the second part of something that I'm working on here, and it's a sort of contemporary piece. I'm interviewing people from Hong Kong. They have to live in Hong Kong, and together we talk about Hong Kong's past, present, and future. The past is obviously there's a lot of nostalgia involved with what we talk about, and the present is very political now, probably not as intense as what you guys do, but we do try to have a good discussion about what we think is happening now, and then we try and basically project forward and try and guess as to what would happen as we get closer and closer to 2047.
Why did you start this podcast?
But I'm making a book.
Okay.
And the books are all very much, once it's published, even if it comes out tomorrow, my book comes out tomorrow, it's still going to be like reflective of when I first came here. So it's already kind of out of date. So I wanted to do something that was contemporary. Okay. I already do another podcast anyway, so it wasn't really too much of a stretch to do a second. So yeah, that's why.
This book that you want to do, it's going to be directly from the interviews that you're getting from the podcast?
Some of it will, but it will be mixed up with a lot of my own writing and my own experiences that I'm collecting, whether it's through writing or with my photography.
Okay.
But how long have you been in Hong Kong?
I've been here for 3 years. Close to 3 years now.
How are you finding it?
It's not...
I
like it here. I do like it here.
Okay.
It's better than...
We won't kill you.
It's better than... I came here for a reason, which was to basically rediscover the country that I grew up in, because I was here as a baby, and I remember my first waking moments being in this country. So I wanted to come back here and revisit it. But also the situation here, for me financially, is much better than it is back in the UK.
That seems to be the running theme with a lot of expats these days, especially from France and Italy and the UK.
But there's also a lot of opportunities here.
Yeah.
Just setting up a podcast, interviewing people, can't do that in the UK as easily, I would say. I'll be financially limited.
Plus, it's more saturated now in terms of that type of stories.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can go to any bookstore and find books on the past, present, future, letters, and all this stuff when it comes to the UK. So
funny you should say that, because I actually have created a book already that's about a city I grew up in the UK, and to keep it short, you've just got to have a different take on it. And so when I was trying to put it in the shops in this city, they were saying, oh, this is very different because it isn't as historical as other books. And it turns out that my book was very much, again, a personal piece, and it was driven by my own experiences. But reading it, you would see it as a very intimate guidebook with all sorts of facts and figures in it. So you're right. Yeah, you are right. But I found something that I could have taken further had I not left.
All right.
Interesting. So what else you are doing apart from these book and the podcast in Hong Kong?
So as I said, I'm doing some photography. I'm actually an English teacher, which is funding my podcast hobby and photography hobby. Okay. But I am actually academically trained as a photographer. I just can't find the work, or I refuse to sort of work for some institution because I'm a bit anti-establishment.
You're a freelancer. You like to do your own thing.
But I have to suffer for being a freelancer at the same time. So I'm an English teacher. I can't do exactly what I want. Right. But the projects that I'm doing are very much a reaction to what I see when I first came here, and then as I'm living here. So my first project was called Traces of an Empire, where I would just walk around Hong Kong and just see things that were traces of colonial Britain. And I'm still sort of deciding on an answer, but I'm wondering, why do people wear the Union Jack everywhere you go? And in some of the images, if they're on a rotation now, you can see...
Let's actually run some of those images while we speak. Yeah, go ahead.
You can see even the badges here. You got these little things. Where's the Hong Kong badge?
The SAR
We're
flag
picking
badge.
the American flag and the British Union Jack.
Yeah, Canadian also.
Superman.
Yeah, and pop culture icons, and
Yeah.
we don't celebrate the Union Jack in the same way as we do back home. So when I came here, I was quite surprised by the fact that there is more of a celebration of the Union Jack, whereas actually in the motherland,
Yeah.
you can't in the same vein. And even if you're like you are going to an England game, you have to get a St George's flag.
Right.
You'd actually be ridiculed if you took the Union Jack because the Union Jack does not
that's
represent
England,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
But you'd be surprised how many people don't realise that. Whereas here, you can't fall into that trap, and so people celebrate it. And I'm trying to decide: is it a political statement or is it a fashion statement? And I had this conversation with somebody on one of my podcasts previously. We seemed to disagree politely. He felt it was fashion, and I felt it was political. But then you get to an image like this,
Yeah.
and then I started to think about, okay, she's got the Union Jack bag.
Yeah.
Right.
Then there's Stonehenge, which is obviously a symbol of the UK, and it's in
Right.
front of the IFC.
Right. Yeah, it was an art
another
project.
institution. There's all these things, and it just makes me question King's Road, and that's just around the corner.
Well,
We wouldn't have named it King's Road if the British hadn't.
Right, exactly.
here, so-
No, we have a lot of colonial governors
Yeah.
with their
So it fascinates
names.
me.
Oh, really?
To
Okay.
have to, just to see it here.
See why then once I suggested that we should change it to more PLC style, like a People's Row or Revolution Row or something.
Yeah, I'm sure he would love
Long
that.
time ago.
Yeah. That was actually a big worry. This was definitely during Occupy.
Yes, so
Yeah.
I stopped.
Mongkok,
I
right?
stopped Traces
Yeah.
of an Empire,
Yeah.
and then went to Mongkok and all the protest campsites.
Okay.
And I wanted to find out why people were going there. And
Okay.
as you can tell, people went for selfies.
Yeah, exactly.
People went
What does that
for-
say, Key? What does that say?
Protecting the student.
Oh, okay.
I could have said that.
Oh, sorry.
And then
I'm
people
testing
went
his Chinese.
for, people went for
Joshua?
obviously, a bit of hero worship.
Yeah.
Which surprised me because then you can get into this whole discussion about narratives that were being created around, especially Joshua, because he was being bandied around, especially that time cover.
Yeah.
He, like,
Well,
he
around
represented
the world,
movement
he's
and-
considered like this new type of revolutionary.
Right, but
Yeah.
he wasn't alone, and
Yeah.
yet there is a narrative to suggest that, well, it's all his doing, and then we have this kind of revulsion.
Yeah.
So people went for, well, as I've put here, selfies, adoration, revulsion, to sleep, to do their homework, and this one.
Did you take this?
Yeah, I took that
Oh,
one.
wow.
That's beautiful.
I had to run
Yeah.
up the mountain on Friday morning before the helicopters took it out.
Yeah.
So I got
Flying
there
through,
20
yeah.
minutes before
Yeah.
they came.
Okay.
That's Lion Rock.
Yeah, Lion
But
Rock.
it's the effort contrasted with this. These
Right.
protest pictures are on my website, and these
Right.
two, the previous one with the Lion Rock and this one,
Yeah.
they contrast well together because somebody went to great effort to put that on the mountain,
Multiple
Right.
times.
right? And then you go back to the streets of Mongkok, and people are sort of like just texting on their phone, and I was just fascinated by this contrast of effort, as I'll put it. And to me, when I walked away from the protests when they ended, I mean, it's no surprise that it wasn't entirely successful, but then people weren't singular in their purpose.
Yeah, it's also hard to sustain something that large without a end goal.
Right.
And, that's how what I found during this.
Yeah.
I thought it was odd, like, we have a democracy class here, but someone's gone to sleep. If you actually went to university and slept in a class, what would that say? It's
But have you admit that it's quite tiring to stay on the street for so long? So
sure, but when you see it like this, I mean, hopefully a lot of these images will come out as joking rather than
Right.
I don't want to become too critical, but
Right.
it's just kind of odd when you contrast the idea of a democracy class informing
Yeah.
others and then someone sleeping in their class.
Right. And then, of course, this was outside the HSBC building there.
Yeah. Some of these images in the project are about addressing contradictions that I found, like old people are not engaged or they're not for democracy or universal suffrage, and clearly that's not the case, and we deal
Not
a
all
lot
of
with
them.
generalizations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not all.
Generally, we found that it is the elderly that do not like all this democracy because they want stability more than anything.
But these images exist to state, this isn't
How about
necessarily
this
true.
one?
That one, all the
Is it-
journalists are just taking the same point of view. It's just mad. They all just want to take that picture where they're opposing the. I mean, like I said, I'm
I find-
anti-establishment, but they're all deliberately going against the police and
That's indicative of mainstream media.
right.
Only taking one point of view.
It's yeah.
That's how what I
Interesting.
find. Yeah.
And then these two that are coming, this one,
Yeah.
the sign says "Pray for Hong Kong," and this was actually
Right.
taken during the protests, but it's not actually on the website because this is going towards a third project that I'm doing,
Okay.
where I'm looking for sentiment in Hong Kong of people's feelings towards what's happening. So this one says pray for Hong Kong, and you have this power generator and the power cord sort of unplugged or not plugged in. Who controls this? There's all these interpretations that you can get from it that sit in front of the
I like this
all
one.
the parts of Hong Kong. This one I like. This is in Taiwan. This one I really liked because someone like reappropriated the F-bomb,
Right.
and because you can tell it's two different graffiti artists or
Right.
two different moments where
One
someone
person just
pulled it
wrote
on the wall.
689 and the person
Yeah.
finished it off there.
So I'm looking for more things like this.
Uh-huh.
So it'll provide a good contrast, I hope, in the book, whereby you have these protests of footnotes and then these quieter pieces where you can just sort of think about how people are changing the environment to reflect their sort of feelings about what's happening here.
When you see graffiti art like that on the streets, do you find that it's just being rude, or do you really get a sense of it's trying to be artistic while it's trying to send a message? Because I find that stuff is walking towards more rudeness than it is actually trying to be truly artistic. Because during Occupy, when you saw the flyers and the bills that were up on the HSBC building, that's where I saw some really neat art. And took some photos too myself. But the street art I find just to be vulgar.
The trouble is, though, with something like the F-bomb with
Yeah.
689, that's very simple.
Yeah.
You're not expending a lot of effort to
Right.
get that up on the wall, whereas
Right.
all that elaborate art,
Yeah.
you could mass produce that
Yeah.
and people can take it home and
Sure.
obviously digest it for themselves. So I think you couldn't go to that level of quality by
Or
scrolling
maybe they
something
just
on
want
the
to
wall.
quickly do it so they get
But
the cops don't catch them.
It's just like some singer on the street, and then they try to perform some really good, but a lot in Mongkok they suck.
What are you talking about? It's the greatest street performances I've ever seen.
I saw some great cardboard, some art scrawled on cardboard
Right.
that was just discarded on the wall. I loved it.
Yeah, no, I understand your point.
Yeah.
It's the same way where Sayong Choi Street has just people that just show up to sit and try to get a few bucks.
Yeah,
Even
so
though
it's-
all they did was turn off the echo on their speaker and try to hide the really bad.
So it's quite difficult to define what is art, and you can just say, oh, because I like
Yeah, I
it, it's
mean
art.
they got a museum dedicated to just poop and saying that's art.
Oh,
so I
got
guess
you.
it's perception. I guess.
True.
Yeah. So you're. I want to go back to your podcast for a second.
Okay.
How are you finding the guests?
Because we have the same question.
Okay.
How?
Well, first I ask my friends,
Yeah.
and then at the end of the show, I have a question where I say, "Would you like to hear from anybody,
Right.
or would you recommend anybody to come on the show?"
Right.
It's a way of ending the show on a positive note,
Yeah.
talking, up somebody else.
Right.
But yeah, I started with my friends and their recommendations, but I actually use Tinder to
that's a
find
good-
people. So I'm not there for
What's
hooking
Tinder?
up.
Yeah.
Some people don't believe me, but
Yeah.
I get through all that.
Yeah.
But it's a very efficient way of finding people who are going to engage. I'm assuming that people who use Tinder are sort of open-minded anyway, so they're going to be on a certain level where they think, yeah, okay, I could come on a podcast and
What is
just chat.
Tinder?
Tinder is an online dating app.
Oh, I see.
It's very well. They say the creators say it's not a dating app, but it's for meeting people. But a lot of people use it for hookups, one-night stands, things like that.
Okay.
And I use it to actually.
Yeah, I knew it. No, later, after the show.
Dan
After the
fucking-
show. After the show.
And of course, the people I met during the protests,
Yeah.
I've actually started getting around to those people now to introduce them to the show.
How are your guests finding the experience?
I don't know. to be
Cathartic
honest.
or happy that somebody's there to listen to their points?
They
or
like
what?
it.
Yeah.
They say. Well, I don't think podcasts are well developed in Hong Kong anyway.
Oh, no, yeah,
I've done a
it's-
few searches, and there's like your podcast.
Yeah.
There's a dubstep podcast which I subscribe to.
Okay.
And RTHK.
Yeah.
I think I listen to the main three.
Right.
Right.
If the dubstep one gets a lot of hits, but I'm not sure.
No, in terms of English, it's not much. But even the Chinese, it's just the stuff that's on the radio, and they just
Yeah.
throw it onto
Well,
iTunes.
I was thinking more of awareness as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to educate a lot of guests. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just need to tell
What
them
a
okay,
podcast is.
I've got to explain what a podcast is, and then I've got to get them to download it.
Yeah.
My website tries to make it easier because there's a tab at the top. You
Right.
can go down and just click play
Right.
on any episode. It's just one page that loads. It's very easy. But then just podcasts in general, if they're on Google, they've got to go to the Play Store because it's worse if it's not on iTunes. If they haven't got
Yeah,
iTunes, sorry.
yeah.
download the app, and then they've got to search for it in the app, and then click subscribe.
Right.
There's like 50 steps, and it hasn't.
I know.
The market for
it's not
podcasts
streamlined
hasn't,
enough.
Yes.
You also have a web Tumblr site, jonathonjk.tumblr.com, and there you talk about journalism.
Yeah, it's
in general,
just things
you said.
just general things about journalism that I'm.
And what about your thoughts on journalism in Hong Kong?
My thoughts on journalism in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm qualified for that, but
Well, just your opinion.
my opinion is
You read SMP, right?
I can't actually, because you got to register, and I've got like one article left.
Okay.
So I'm saving
Yeah, you
it.
have to pay for it.
Yes,
Yes, yes,
I'd
yes.
rather they went with the New York Times sort of
but
model.
for English speaking people here, then how would you get the news? Where would you get the local news here?
I get it all from RTHK and you guys. When it comes to political news,
Yeah,
I don't
okay.
actually own a TV. Maybe I'm
Thank you.
I'm an outlier because I get probably 80% of my news from podcasts. I listen to about 80 podcasts. So I subscribe to 80 podcasts anyway. So they're all various.
Because the thing about podcasts is that sometimes the show is like a 30 minutes or an hour. It's quite difficult to listen. I mean, in Hong Kong, it's just too, when you...
Much.
Yeah, it's too long. Is it too long for you?
At the same time, I have to say that it's actually good because how else are you supposed to kill time during your commutes? I think the potential.
That's the problem in Hong Kong because you don't really take much time to go to one place to another place.
Well, not if you're going from Tin Soi Wai to your job in Taiwan or like Admiralty even. That is still a long drive, or if you're on the bus, or if it's still a long MTR ride. Personally, I find podcast is underused in the city. There's potential for it to be huge. It's just that it's not publicized enough.
Well-
That's how I find it.
Well, the thing is, I can fit in 80 podcasts, 80 different podcasts.
Right.
But the time isn't really a concern. I actually listen to you guys on like 1.5 times speed. So your hour-long podcasts,
He speaks very slow because he speaks very slow.
one your podcasts don't actually
stumble
last
over
an
my
hour
words.
for me.
Okay.
But some of the podcasts I listen to are some of them are investigative pieces, and they're only 20 minutes. I think there's one called Reveal, and then I listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, and his podcasts have like a 3-hour time limit, which I can get through in like 2 hours.
Okay.
So to me, time isn't an issue, and obviously you can stop and start. So what I like long podcasts because you can get into a really good meaty discussion.
Right.
And Joe Rogan will say the same thing. He loves 3-hour podcasts, and he was always told, no, you got to keep it under an hour. With my own show, I do keep it under an hour.
Yeah.
At the moment,
Yeah.
but as I'm finding more interesting people, I'm making 2 versions, an extended version. So
Okay.
episode 14 was with this expat who's been here since 1975. He had a lot to say about the history of Hong Kong, whereas maybe the mid-30s or the mid-25-year-old guests I have don't. So I'm developing the show to allow for longer listens and shorter listens. But I'm always like, I just podcasted yesterday, and I thought to myself, why do I really have to keep it under an hour? I'm still questioning it.
Because like people like me, I'm so impatient.
Yeah,
And
really.
I just couldn't take an hour to listen to a whole show.
But like I say, you could speed it up.
We've become, the society has become short attention span theater.
Yeah.
I know. I'm the
Right?
same way.
So that's why once we attempted a 2-hour podcast, 1, we were exhausted, and 2, people were like, don't do that again. So we just went back to an hour.
Yeah.
So we find even 1 hour for some people is a stretch. But we keep it there because that's the only way we can get all our stuff in.
But I think with podcasting, well, it probably comes from television, where you had to work to a network standards of like, well, you got an hour or half an hour,
Right.
and that's all you have, and you had to conform to that. Whereas with podcasts, you don't have to conform. But I think there's enough of them out there that you can find, some that are only 3 minutes long. In fact, I do listen to one that's only 3 minutes long. It's called The Memory Palace. It's very quick, obviously. And then you find some that are 100 times that in length, and there's something for everyone. But I don't think if you allow yourself to be sort of limited by if people haven't got the patience, then tough luck.
Okay.
I feel
Yeah.
because then I can't enjoy it. I want
Yeah.
to do podcasts. I want to talk about something for 3 hours. Why should I only talk about it for 30 minutes?
Well,
I mean, yeah, editing, you got to edit it. Sure.
I understand, but there is potential, and the more podcasts come in, the more popular they get. It will pick up. It's just going to take a little time. Right now, people are still kind of stuck in the traditional media when it comes to audio and video. But let's get back to
Okay.
your work here. This documentary you're working on. Any release date or potential release date or?
I'm not very quick with my projects. As I said, I'm just getting around to the people I met at the protests.
Right.
This is why I'm podcasting.
Uh-huh.
I'm doing something.
Right.
It's getting me on a schedule.
Uh-huh.
But I haven't even started writing for the book yet.
Hmm.
So it could be. And I mean, why should I be in a rush? I say this to myself, not because you just asked me.
Yeah.
Why should I rush? Because what's happening in Hong Kong is ongoing. So I can take some time and consideration.
That's the thing. I find that when people say, I don't have a time limit, things are still ongoing, but there's so much that keeps coming in, you want to keep adding and adding and adding and adding, you'll never finish it.
Yeah.
So
I've got to finish it.
What I think is you release the first one.
Yes.
Call it part 1.
Yes.
Wait for whatever happens. Part 2. Wait for what happens. 3. You got a trilogy. Right?
It's interesting how I've actually done that in my mind when I've approached it to podcasting. 'Cause I want to make a series of podcasts.
Okay.
So I want to do 50 before the end of this year. So it's like I'm on a schedule of doing one every 6 days.
Okay.
Then after that, I'm going to change it up and do something different. But I haven't approached that sort of thinking,
Right.
or I haven't applied that thinking to my book. But I should maybe do it in volumes.
I think that
I should.
at least you can get it out of the way, and then you can move on to the next thing. Because there are brilliant documentary makers out there, and then they've been working on the same documentary for 5 years because new stuff came out, and they got to add that into their film before they release
sure.
it, and it never comes out. And then when it does come out, the hype is gone, and the subject has changed. So release it, call it volume 1. Then the next one, part 2, you know?
Yeah.
How many Rambo films are there? Like 10. So you can do the same way. If they can do it, we can do it, you know, with the documentaries. Okay, what else do you want to talk about when it comes to your work?
Well, I'm just looking for a bit of help with regards to the latest project. If anybody, let's call it crowdsourcing.
Okay.
If people can tell me, because I can't explore Hong Kong in its entirety, but if people can come to me and communicate and say, hey, there's this great piece of graffiti here, or someone's done this there, then let me know and I'll go there with my camera and start taking pictures.
Okay. I think the best way, though, is Hong Kong is not so Twitter friendly. It's more Facebook friendly.
Yeah.
You got to get on Facebook.
I am on Facebook. I use Twitter more.
Yeah, I know. People
Just share it. I mean.
I know, but if you want to search, you got to go on Facebook, because that's how I find my news and everything. Oh, a friend of mine liked this story, and then I go to that page, and then that's how you develop your network. And then you go to certain meetings, you find out there's somebody puts up a great piece of art, and that's how you find out, because they like that photo.
Sure. I mean, when I came here to interview you guys for episode 5, and I met Richard Scottford,
Right.
he was saying like he gets a lot of traffic from his Facebook page,
In Hong
and I didn't
Kong,
have Facebook at the time, and I've only just got it back.
Okay.
So I'm a bit.
Yeah.
It's like I say, I'm anti-establishment. I don't really want to use Facebook, but that's where everybody is. That's where your friends are. But
you use the platforms that are available to you, even if you don't like them.
Yes.
You know, I don't like YouTube's monopoly, but we're on it. You know, I don't like Facebook's intrusiveness with getting all our information, but I'm on it. It's the best way to get the information out in this connected world.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So our suggestion is get on Facebook, and trust me.
No, I am now. I am on Facebook now.
But be active on it. You can't just be on it, because we have friends who are on Twitter but are never using it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've noticed that
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
It's too crowded of people, I think, in Twitter, more activists there for the local people.
Yeah, that's a great place to get your news, because a lot of the international media uses Twitter, and that's how they keep it out. But locally, grassroots, it's Facebook in the city.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Can I just say, if anybody
Sure.
is wanting to come on the podcast, their English ability should not concern them. I get a lot of people say, "Oh, but my English is not good." Well, la.
Then-
And I'm like, oh, it's okay.
Speak Cantonese. You can
Well, you
speak
could. I'm
Cantonese,
actually
right?
having someone. I'm actually going to get someone to help me, and we might be able to do bilingual episodes
Okay.
in some form. So if anybody is considering it, they can just come on. Don't have to give their name. It's not televised like this one,
Right.
so they can just give a fake name and just have a chat with me.
All right. So let me plug your site again. JonathanJK.com. That's his website. At JonathanJK on Twitter. And you don't know your Facebook handle yet?
You can just
Or-
search for me as Jonathan J.K. Morris.
Okay, Jonathan
Yeah, yeah.
J.K. Morris. Just search it, and it will show up. And but here's what I'm still trying to understand. You came here for that.
You mean to Hong Kong?
To Hong Kong,
Right.
Specifically. But what happens when you're finished with your series? Do you move on to another city, or do you find different things that you might want to explore of Hong Kong?
Where I used to live last
Yeah.
was where my university was.
Okay.
And all the other students complained there's nothing in this city to photograph. I made sure I found something to photograph. Hong Kong
I
is
find that
limitless.
Interesting.
I had no problem finding projects, and the projects I found were just outside university. Outside the door of university, kids were just hanging around, loitering around, and I made it into an 18-month project about how people perceive youth culture in the UK. And then around the corner at night time, there's a group of guys who hung out with their cars, and they were car enthusiasts. So I found another project. And by this point,
And they said there's nothing to photograph
Well,
in the
yeah.
city? I don't think they're looking
they want to go to
hard
London.
enough.
They wanted to go to London because Swansea, that's where I lived. Swansea was like 3 or 4 hours away by train or by bus, and they wanted to go there, but they wouldn't stay in Swansea and photograph. Swansea, by comparison to Hong Kong, this is easy. I can
Yeah.
find something here to keep me active till I die.
I'm very no, it's true.
I could document my own death.
You can. I find that very surprising that somebody says. That's why I don't
why
buy
Hong
it when
Kong?
people say Hong Kong is a cultural wasteland. I just don't buy it. You're just not looking hard
It's-
enough, or you're looking at something else.
Like a lot of people who live here want to leave, and I gladly came here, and I think, wow, this is amazing, and I could spend so much time in Central and Yau Ma Tei because I live in the Yau Ma Tei
Yeah,
area,
yeah.
or in Kowloon side,
Yeah.
and I never go to Aberdeen, and I go to Aberdeen like last month,
Yeah.
and I thought, why do I never come here? There's so much to do
It's-
here.
yeah, yeah.
It's so different, and it seems to be
Exactly.
doesn't seem to concern itself with the politics that happened just over the hill.
Yeah.
And you could spend days
Each
just photographing.
district has its own uniqueness. I mean, that's how awesome the city is.
But also the podcast.
And the people who want to leave,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you off, but the people who want to leave, you'll be back. Go ahead.
But
Just
you could
like you.
Yeah.
You did it.
But you could
Exactly.
you could do a photography project about people who want to leave, and another project about the people who want to come back.
Right. Yeah,
and-
there
and
you go.
with my own podcast-
The government's actually working hard to get people back here. So you're gonna tie that into that.
Could do make it, and then make it. You don't have to make it political,
Yeah.
but you could. But with my own podcast, when I ask people to come on the show, I give them a secondary question at the end, which is, can I photograph you at a later date?
Yeah.
So I don't have any hard ideas as to how to
Right.
create portraits of individuals who live in Hong Kong. So I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
I'm just taking pictures of street scenes and like this request for help with graffiti or things that I find when I see a Union Jack. That's 3 already and doesn't
Yeah.
involve really people being the center of attention. And then eventually I do want to do that, but in a very much more considered manner, and
Awesome.
then put that into the book. So there's all
Well-
sorts you could do here.
Again, that's jonathanjk.com or Twitter at jonathanjk or on Facebook, Jonathan J.K. Morris. And what's your podcast called?
Oh yeah, we forgot.
Yeah.
Right. The podcast is called the Hong Kong People Podcast.
The Hong Kong People Podcast. Search on iTunes, it'll show up.
Yeah.
And plus, it's on your website.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's 2 places you can go to find that. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for coming in.
Thank you for having
And
me.
We're on episode
5.
5. Okay, so you can
Yeah.
find our conversation.
And I'm on episode
5.
45.
You're on 45.
Yeah.
All right. So this is our final segment. We give out a Shame on You award. And who is your nominee?
I mean, like, so too easy to give it to CY Land. So,
No, come on. That's
no, I'm not going to give it to him.
I'm going to nominate Ambrose Lee
Why?
for his ridiculous comment that the reason that that kidnapping happened with the Bossini heiress is because of Occupy.
I agree, but I would like to give some award to Andy Zhang because he's passing away. So
He's moving on to semi-retirement.
give a mark to him at his last day. So
We have a stalemate. Who would you pick? Or do you just want to stay out of this?
just the plums who can't get off a bus and talk to people.
I mean, between Andy Jung and Ambrose Lee.
I'm not very good at names. Which one didn't get
Ambrose
off the
Lee-
bus?
Oh, that was Carrie Lam and them.
Yeah.
But we were talking about the security secretary, former, that said Occupy happened because, the kidnappings happened because of Occupy, and we have Andy Jung because he was the police chief during
yeah,
Occupy.
and he's going to retire.
He's-
And he retired
he's in
already. Yeah.
semi-retirement. Yeah.
The police guy.
All
Yeah.
right, so all right, 2 to 1. So Andy Jung, you have just received the
Shame on you.
award so you can enjoy that in retirement.
Yes.
And that is the end of our show. Please go to facebook.com/IONHK pod. Same thing with Twitter at IONHK pod. You can just search us on iTunes. We are still doing a podcast audio, but it's a week behind because I want you to watch the video. But we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.